And the senator is going to she has another committee meeting. She's going to be coming back. And Mr. Bell, we just got a note, is coming back here very shortly. And Mr. Monning is another committee meeting coming back here shortly. And I know it's a busy day, so thank you, Ms. Hancock. Now we're going to be, good afternoon, sir, and welcome. Frank is the Executive Director of the County Welfare Directors Association, and we're grateful that you're there.
I think
Frank, yes. Go ahead, Frank.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Micco at the County Welfare Directors Association. We appreciate your concern and the concern, obviously, of the other senators on the panel for this really important issue. I'm here to tell you that the County Human Services Directors find this to be an extremely important issue as well. We welcome your attention and interest and look forward to working with you. Certainly, the data is limited, but what's out there and our own experience tells us that it certainly appears that there is an over-reliance problem on psychotropic medications. And as everyone has said, for some youth, for some period of time, there is a place for this medication. It's our collective job, though, to ensure that psychotropic medication is not used as an alternative or in lieu of more appropriate and more efficacious non-pharmacological alternatives. The role of the County Welfare Department or the County Human Service Agency literally is that of the parents. When we remove a child from the custody, we assume a parental responsibility, and we believe we have the highest responsibility to ensure the well-being of those children. Our job certainly is not to be a medical clinician. We're not doctors. We're not psychiatrists. And we're not the final decision maker on whether a child may receive or may be prescribed an antipsychotic or psychotropic medication. Obviously, in our state, that decision is rested with the juvenile court judge. But our job is to be informed, to ask questions, to be an advocate for the children who are in our care, to work with our partner agencies to ensure an appropriate array of services for children within our care, to monitor their well-being, and to raise concerns if we have worries about whether or not the care plan is meeting the child's needs. The same things that you would do for your children, the same things that any of us would do for our children. Our association has participated in all of the efforts that we've discussed so far. QIP, the KDA process, the Continuum of Care Reform process. And there has been some excellent dialogue and collaboration with the departments that are here to be commended for it. And certainly our participation in all those efforts tell us we can do better as a state. And two areas that CWDA will be focusing on this year I'd like to talk about for a bit. The first area is to improve the court approval process. And the second area is to increase the supply of foster families and relative caregivers so children have alternatives to group care. With respect to the court approval process, a couple of the things that we need as social workers and the de facto parents, we need better information on what drugs kids are actually taking. In the JV 220 process, we know what pharmaceuticals have been prescribed. We don't know which pharmaceuticals have been picked up at the pharmacy, have been paid for. We don't know which pills have been swallowed necessarily. And so in order to properly monitor, we need better information about by child about exactly what drugs not just are being prescribed, but are being filled and are actually being taken. Because we're not experts, we need an alert system. We need some of the professionals, like the doctor that was on the first panel, to come together and give us an alert system so that when we find information that a child has been prescribed a particular drug at a particular dosage, if that drug is in a combination with another drug that might be dangerous, an unusually high dosage, contraindicated perhaps for a child of that age, we need to be alerted so that we can look out for whatever side effects or other consequences might come from that particular instance. We need more information in that court process, in that court approval process, about the totality of the child's mental health treatment plan. Not just the current one, but prior ones to the extent that there are, so that when a judge is given the information and makes a decision to approve or to deny, it's not just these are the behaviors Zoloft has been prescribed, but what do we know about the treatment that, if any, that the child has had up to this point? What else is happening in the child's treatment plan? A much more robust, full picture of the child's life, we believe, would improve the court approval process. We need a more systematic way to integrate the observations of caregivers and to give a voice for the youth themselves in that court approval process. And finally, in this regard, we believe many actors in the system need training: social workers, judges, CASAs, attorneys, so that we are knowledgeable and can perform our parental duty as effectively as possible.
No, thank you so much, and greatly appreciate your words. Good to see you again, sir.
Thank you.
And I know there will be some questions and comments. It's now my pleasure to be able to introduce Dr. Bill Arroyo, who's the medical director from Los Angeles County, and speaking on behalf of the County Behavioral Health Directors Association. Doctor, we're grateful that you would travel here today for this important hearing, and welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman Senator McGuire and Senator Bell and others who are here today. First, if I may make a minor correction to the agenda, my name is William Arroyo, so people call me Bill, but in the agenda it's William, just for the record. Thank you for that. So I am here representing the County Behavioral Health Directors Association, which, as some of you may know, is a policy voice of the 58 county behavioral health departments. I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist by profession, and I'd like to clarify something. I think there was some information shared by an earlier panel which warrants some correction, and that is that every child and adolescent psychiatrist is a physician by training. Every child and adolescent psychiatrist has completed medical school training. And so it is with that medical school background that we approach the treatment of children and youth who are on psychotropic medication. I am employed by Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, where I serve as not the medical director, but I am one of the regional medical directors of the Department of Mental Health, and I also serve as the medical director for Children's Mental Health Services of the county, of the county's Department of Mental Health. I also am a treating child and adolescent psychiatrist for both dependents and wards of the state. During the past 3 years, I've had the privilege of working with staff from DHCS and DSS to address the twofold federal mandate of improving oversight of the use of psychotropic medication and addressing trauma in the foster care population. Currently, I serve on the state's clinical work group and expert panel, and was a member of the state delegation that went to Washington, D.C. in 2012 to get some preliminary technical assistance on these issues. The members of the association deeply acknowledge the vulnerabilities of children in the foster care system and are committed to assuring that their medically necessary mental health needs are met to support their resilience and healthy development. A wide array of services are provided to this population in many different types of settings, including the child's home. Some of these interventions have directly to do with helping those symptoms related to trauma, among other psychosocial interventions. Best practices require that psychosocial interventions are considered prior to the use of psychotropic agents. In regard to the oversight of the use of such agents, the county behavioral health departments employ child and adolescent psychiatrists to assist juvenile courts with the JV 220 review process. And as I think most of you know by now, that is the psychotropic administration request that is submitted to judges. So there is often communication between the county behavioral health department psychiatrist and the prescriber when there's a concern regarding a proposed medication regimen. After the review of the JB 220, the county psychiatrist will make a recommendation to the juvenile court judge for his or her decision to approve or not. Now, the review process varies from county to county depending on how many requests are made to the court. Last year, the state sponsored a statewide summit whereby counties shared their procedures in an effort to enhance their review process in their respective counties. Although not required by regulation, many counties use the same review process with their probation youth to, again, assure the safe and effective use of psychotropic agents in that population. Medications which are administered by physicians who work for managed healthcare plans are not the purview of the county behavioral health departments, and so that may be a gap in terms of oversight. And I should also mention that medications administered in hospitals are generally administered on an emergent basis and are not reviewed by the infrastructure of county behavioral health departments until after the fact that they have been administered. In Los Angeles County, where this matter is taken very, very seriously, we review approximately 12,000 JB 220 forms on an annual basis, and thereby have developed an infrastructure for this review process that includes a full-time pharmacist and a full-time child and adolescent psychiatrist to assist the approximately 25 juvenile courts. If there are concerns about the proposed medication, then the inquiry ensues into a more extensive review, which may include direct communication with the prescriber, a visit to the child's home, and a review of medical records if necessary.
And Doctor, I don't mean to cut you off at all. I'm just going to have you take another 2 minutes just because I want to make sure we get to questions as well, sir. I apologize.
In addition, the county has developed some clinical parameters that relate to restriction of the use of psychotropic agents among the foster care population, with the highest restrictions reserved for the very young age group. Also, the County Department of Mental Health has developed clinical parameters around dosaging and any other relevant issues, medical issues, for the use of these medications in children. These parameters are updated on a quarterly basis in collaboration with local academicians, pediatricians, pharmacists, and community prescribers. The state expert panel has recommended to DHCS to adopt the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health parameters. In summary, the association deems it essential to collaborate with all the human service systems in order to best serve these children. And so the association is committed to working with all the folks here at on this panel to resolve the remaining challenges. Thank you.
Doctor, thank you so much. And again, did not mean to interrupt you, and I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you so much. What I'd like to be able to do is open it up for questions and see if the senator, and thank you so much. I know you've had a really busy day today. Do you think, Senator Bell, and if you had any questions or comments, sir?
Senator Mitchell and I wrote a letter in November requesting data information, and we're interested in seeing when that data is going to be given to us, and some of it has. We would like to know, on behalf of Senator Mitchell and I, when that will be completed.
I believe that's mine. We have submitted data as recently as yesterday. We are working through the list. It's a very complex and labor-intensive process, and so we're working through the list to try to get you your data, and we're prioritizing your request to get this data to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. And when do you think it'll be completed, do you think?
That I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and ask, but I know that they're working diligently on
So
it.
it's not going to be impeded by anything in any way?
No, they have given this a priority.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you so much. I have a few questions. I heard, again, thank you, 5 of you for being here and know how busy all of you are. I heard one individual on the panel, Mr. Mecca, talk about, and I'm going to paraphrase here, sir, concerns over the volume, my words, of psychotropic drugs being used in the foster care system. So I heard one individual out of the panel. So and then we heard, just being candid, about how folks are working together and executive team has been established, a community team's been established.
Yeah.
But I think that the frustration is that, and again, I'm looking at Mr. Lightbourne. Mr. Lightbourne took the position in 2011. So it's a royal you. What I'm concerned about is we can't go on with the status quo. And we all knew that this hearing today is based on, and it may be my editorial, but I believe the data is on our side, is the misuse of psychotropic medication within the state foster care system. And I heard one individual address the issue. So I'd like to be able to hear, are there concerns about the volume of psych meds in the foster care system here in California?
There's very deep concern about the volume. The question becomes not to say all usage is inherently wrong.
Correct.
It's finding what is needed for which individual child or youth in care. And I think implicit in the goals that we shared in the slide deck, the PowerPoint, were the reduction of usage, the reduction of polypharmacy, and the increased use of psychosocial. All of that says, yes, we want to bring that number down. We also know, as we've discussed in prior panels, that the utilization rate is extraordinarily high in congregate care settings. And hence, a major part of the reason for the continuum of care reform agenda and the strategy for reducing the use of congregate care, restricting it purely to specific treatment purposes, and then having psychosocial services following children into family-based care, either relatives or foster family homes, is specifically to reduce the overuse and particularly use for behavioral control reasons. So I just want to be very clear that that's our position.
Absolutely. And as we've seen, with all due respect, I think back in 2006, there were a lot of discussion about some of these same issues that were brought up on med control, and we've actually seen an increase since '06. So I think that's where the concern lies. So let's just talk about that a bit. The doctors and incentives, and there's been a lot of discussion about physicians essentially receiving incentives when it comes to just distribution of medication to foster youth. Do you want to comment on that a bit?
It's very troubling. I mean, as the point was made on a prior panel, Vermont has actually legislated against it. I think the whole notion of enticing the use of what is potentially a dangerous drug, and particularly used in interactions, is abhorrent. And I particularly like the comment of the person who said, went to one dinner, realized it was bait and switch, realized exactly what the deal was, and that, not going back. To the extent we can, as a state, restrict that, I think that's all to the good. as we develop the evaluation instruments that are going to be part of reviewing the work of the short-term residential treatment centers under CCR, as well as the FFA treatment programs, one of the things we will be looking for is the incidence of use, rates, length of use. Do they step down promptly into non-congregate care settings? Those are exactly the sort of outcomes that this whole measure is to track against. Not having been part of the 2006 dialogue here, I was then sort of in county incarnation. What I think we didn't do in 2006 was we didn't restructure the placement system. And the treatment, whether it is psychosocial or it is based on chemical or medication, is nested in the ecology of the placement system. And we have continued to have a placement system that doesn't match our stated intentions. What we've now committed to as an administration and what we have as proposals coming to the legislature is a restructure of the placement system and a restructure of where services are delivered so that we never move children to a place because that's where services are. We move services to where the children are.
And I think just carrying on that, and thank you, Director, for that, is that and I think you said it yourself, it's going to take some significant time to transition. Yeah. And from my research, what I've seen is that particularly in group homes, you have individuals that either contract with the group home manager or actually has medical staff on board with their own staff that are prescribing these medications. And the state simply is not tracking that. And so I guess where my piece is California has to be focused. If we're looking at a wholesale change, and as we know, it's going to take time, but these foster youth don't have the time, and the longer we wait, the worse the outcome is for foster youth. So let's get into that a bit about your thoughts on that.
The data sharing systems that we're now developing between DHCS, CDSS, and with the counties is basically intended to track the individual cases of children and youth who are being prescribed. That then equips the county both in its role as parent, in its role as case manager, but also in its role as the placement entity to know which providers are doing what. It also equips us as the licensing agency and as the program oversight agency to know which group homes are having high incidence of use. And in the short term, we will certainly be very close, very attentive to those situations. But as Mr. Rodriguez and Ms. Hoffman sort of noted in the first panel, ultimately what's going to be, in response to Ms. Hancock's question, or Mr. Monning's question as to what makes the difference, they said being in an environment which the supportive relationships and the love. So even while we do it from an enforcement point of view, which we will be doing, we have to move to an environment where the ecology makes sense, as opposed to contradicts what we're trying to do.
And I hear that, and I think that the challenge that I've seen, and we've had some individual meetings within the North Bay area, and my concern is that when you talk with individual directors within the child welfare system and individuals with the mental health system, it's like this. And there are significant gaps that exist about who is ultimately responsible and why there are problems. And I think we've all heard this. And I think that we still have a significant road to travel to be able to get there. And so that is a concern that, particularly in the short term, that gap is still, my opinion, and anecdotal. When we pull individuals together from the North Bay area, it is at times contradictory of the individuals who say one thing, then you have child welfare saying one, mental health saying another.
I think it's important to note that there has been historic disconnects. Part of the whole core practice model that lies behind KDA is literally how, it's not enough to get mad at it. You got to find a way to mesh it. As Ms. Baylor mentioned, we and they have been emphasizing to the counties that EPSDT is an entitlement. It is to be provided. There may be capacity issues. There may be issues of building referral connections and systems. That's all stuff that we're sort of engaged in actively now. This isn't a aspirational, we will get to it. This is work that's going on the ground now. And those counties that are effectively engaging through the KDA process, through the and claiming to the Medicaid side of that process, are proving they can do it. It's not going to be complete tomorrow, however.
Which is why, again, I think that we need to be able to stay on this, and why we're going to be having another meeting. And Mr. Lightbourne, just one other item, and I know other panelists want to be able to comment on this, is that I think the other issue that I have concern about is that there's been some discussion about services that are available for foster youth. And I am not an expert, but what I've seen as a member of the Board of Supervisors is that there are challenges of providing foster youth early on the services when there's transition from the home that they're being taken out of to either the group home they're being placed in or the individualized home. And then what we do is rely on the pill to be able to look at behavioral control as they are trying to get settled into the new placement that they're in. And then as we see, it's inconsistent level of mental health services throughout, particularly in the group home system, which I know you're very focused on the continuum of care. And I say all this is because this is going to take additional funding. We're spending nearly $250 million on psychotropic drugs now through Medicaid, and I think 72% of that is on foster youth. Can we look at additional investments, because that's what it's going to take, right, is additional investment to be able to provide additional wraparound service?
Yes, and what it's going to take is as part of the system that is already being put in place, sort of the strengthened, upfront, trauma-informed assessment of every child coming into care, particularly using the child and family team approach, and not having children have to fail up into higher levels of care, but have children begin with the care they need, and particularly with the trauma remediation services that they need. And that will take resources.
And I think that's going to be the challenge, whether it is realignment dollars that have been discussed and or additional dollars as we see this economy turn around. And again, just being frank and not at all, it's royal, Mr. Lightbourne, right, is that that's where we have faced challenges as a state. When we look at these type of reforms, it takes dollars, and it either dies at appropriations or it's not signed, the legislation that is. And I think that's where we need to be able to focus.
It has to become a mutual priority.
Absolutely. And I don't know if anyone else wants to be able to chime in. Please, Mr. Macon.